And Andrew Jackson ran for president, or more precisely, he stood for president in 1824. And he lost a close and bitter contest. In the election of 1824, no one of the four candidates got a majority in the Electoral College. And as a result, the decision went to the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, the second place finisher, John Quincy Adams, Jackson got the largest number of popular votes and the largest number of electoral votes. But he didn't get a majority of the electors, and so he didn't win. The race went to the House of Representatives. And in the House of Representatives, the number 2 finisher, John Quincy Adams, joined forces with the number 4 finisher, Henry Clay of Kentucky, who was one of Jackson's bitter enemies, and who was also the Speaker of the House, and who could swing the vote the way he wanted. And the vote wound up making John Quincy Adams president. And Andrew Jackson's supporters contended that this was the result of what they widely called a corrupt bargain. And the corruption came about when, shortly after Quincy Adams won the vote in the House of Representatives, he turned around and appointed Henry Clay to be Secretary of State. Now you might think, well, big deal, Secretary of State. In those days, the Secretary of State was the heir apparent to the presidency. Vice presidents had no future in those days. The Secretaries of State became the next president. This had been the practice from Thomas Jefferson on through John Quincy Adams, who had recently been Secretary of State. And so Henry Clay had every reason to believe, and people in the United States had every reason to believe, that Henry Clay was the next president of the United States. Now this is important not simply for the frustrated ambitions of Andrew Jackson, but because it seemed to reject the idea of democracy, that people could choose their president. This was the first election in which a majority of the electors were chosen by ordinary people. Until then, the electors had been chosen mostly by state legislatures. And they could be today still. Nothing in the Constitution says you get to vote for president. You don't even get to vote for electors. The states shall choose the electors. That's what the Constitution says. And if the states choose to do it by legislative fiat, they can. Anyway, the fact that John Quincy Adams became president by a result of this bargain with Henry Clay seemed to the Jacksonians, who are going to be called the Democrats very shortly, it seemed to be a denial of the basic principle of democracy, because the Jacksonians knew that Quincy Adams and a lot of people of Adams' persuasion in politics did reject the idea of democracy. You will remember from your study of history that democracy wasn't something that the Founding Fathers thought was a good thing. They thought it was a bad thing. They wrote this Constitution to ensure the prevention of democracy. Now things evolved so that by the 1820s, democracy came to be the way most people thought the country ought to be governed, but not John Quincy Adams, not his supporters. And so Jackson thought, and his supporters thought, that the fact that he had lost, particularly by the way he had lost, meant that democracy was really at stake.